You ever had someone literally speak down to you in front of a room full of strangers, like they could flatten your whole life into a joke and everyone would clap because it made them feel taller? Sit with that, because this is the story of a man who got tired of being unseen, who carried a quiet expertise for decades, and who chose one night to stop shrinking. And when he spoke, a room full of money started to crumble. Act 1. Hook, Marcus Lane, worked nights on the 38th floor of a firm called Summit Bridge Capital, in a glass tower that looked like it was built to stare at the rest of the city. His cart squeaked on polished stone. His uniform smelled like lemon cleaner, and he knew the building the way people know their own bones. Where the coffee stains hide which trash can hides the draft memos, who tosses lunch notes, and who tosses life-changing pages. He was there for the hours nobody wanted, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week salary that covered the rent, but not much else, sharing a one-bedroom with his sister and her son in an old walk-up 3 subway stops from the river. Marcus had an old grad school degree tucked away a handful of good years at a firm that chewed him up and spat him out after he raised his hand about risky mortgage products. They labeled him difficult, and then they closed the door. That was 12 years ago. Since then, he kept his head down, kept learning quietly, kept a little notebook of things he noticed, patterns, phrases, numbers, because the kind of mind that can see the fracture in an argument doesn't turn off overnight. On the night everything changed, Summit Bridge hosted an investor evening for a new product. A trading engine called Platinum Edge promised to be the next wave, the kind of pitch where people pay to feel like insiders. Owen Carlyle, who owned the firm, and the smile that went with it, was there in a suit so sharp it seemed to weigh more than Marcus's whole paycheck, flanked by partners with matching teeth and matching assurance. Marcus was doing his rounds, emptying bins, wiping down the conference room where the presentation would take place. Owen saw him and decided to make sport of him, because humiliating someone quiet is the fastest way to show the crowd who's in charge. "Hey, cleaning man," he called loud enough for the room to still feel it. "You stand around our meetings all the time. Give us a stock tip, would you? You must hear something down there among the trash." The laugh that followed was the kind that cleans the conscience of an entire room. Marcus's palms went dry. He could have walked away, finished the night, kept his dignity folded and neat. But when you keep a secret for years, saving it like a coin, there comes a moment when the coin either buys you nothing or it buys you a voice. He looked at Owen. Really looked not at the suit, but at the man pretending to be a god. And he thought of his nephew's inhaler that cost more than a week's paycheck. He thought of his sister's second job. He thought of that memo he wrote years ago about mortgage bundles that screamed wrongness and got buried in someone's drawer. He thought about what his dead mother used to say. Dignity isn't something people give you, it's something you refuse to hand over. Marcus walked into the circle and said quietly, "If you want a tip, close out your short on Helix Therapeutics before the market opens tomorrow." Silence is a sneaky thing. It gets loud in a room full of people who assumed their laughter would be the loudest sound. Owen's smile flickered. The first crack. "Close, a short, who are you to tell me what to do?" he sneered, the room leaning like a wave toward the bait. Marcus didn't answer with heat. He answered with details, because facts have weight, and they're harder to shrug off than anger. He explained, steady and unflinching, that 3 weeks ago he found a printout in a recycling bin. Internal trial data for Helix. The headline said the trial failed, but page 32 told a different story. A subgroup of patients with a specific biomarker responded at 90%, and a companion diagnostic was clearing the FDA quietly next month, which would flip the market's view overnight. He'd seen offhand notes about acquisition interest in a margin note and a risk memo recommending caution on certain regional banking exposures. He'd photographed them with an old phone because when you don't have headlines, you keep evidence. Act 2. Effort and turning point. The crowd did the thing phones do now. They leaned forward, thumbed, searched, and for the first time, many faces in that room realized the story might not belong entirely to Owen tonight. Owen tried to bully his way back into control, jokes a louder laugh, but Marcus kept the pace slow, conversational, the way someone who'd led meetings before can make the technical feel human. He explained how Platinum Edge's performance reports the glossy deck they'd been showing trimmed the tough years out of the story and boiled the numbers down to a fantasy because the real performance clogged the printer in a forgotten office. He described where to look in the documents no one reads anymore, the little things executives pulp without a glance. People started murmuring, then whispering, then clicking. The turning point didn't come from rage, it came from verification. An older investor named Harold Price, a man who'd weathered market storms and still kept his thinking cap on, stood up, asked Marcus a question only someone with real knowledge could answer. Marcus answered with a clarity that left no room for performance theatrics. Specifics dates a confidence that comes from repetition and quiet study, not from bravado. Harold's face shifted from curiosity to that unmistakable look of recognition, the kind you get when you realize you've been staring at the back of the puzzle piece and someone just turned it right side up. Owen's posture went from theatrical to petty to desperate. He tried to call Marcus a thief for reading discarded documents, called it corporate espionage, as if the trash can was an exclusive club he owned. Marcus's phone cracked, and Humble showed photos of the notes, the trial pages, the risk memo with the bold, urgent stamp he'd found tossed behind a printer. The room watched the proof, and like dominoes, doubts began to topple. A junior analyst, the one who told Marcus he was overlooking details years ago when Marcus had tried to warn, stepped forward and admitted voice shaking that he had indeed marked a memo urgent and been instructed to drop it in the shred pile by order from on high. Nobody in that room could pretend ignorance anymore. Act 3. Victory and Open Ending. The market responded fast. Not mythical, not cinematic in the slow-motion sense, but in the brutal, efficient way capital moves. Word leaked, traders adjusted. Helix popped when acquisition chatter hit the wires, and regional banks that Owen had loved were repriced when their commercial loan exposures showed up on morning sheets. Marcus watched the ripple from the floor he had cleaned for years, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something like breathing. But the real victory wasn't the trading ticks or the offended billionaire, it was the thaw in the room. People who had seen him as invisible, now handing him business cards, offers questions respect. Harold Price, the old investor, asked for Marcus's number on the spot and offered an analyst role with real pay and benefits. A reporter asked for an interview. A foundation started an emergency fund for his nephew's medication. His estranged daughter, who hadn't called in years, left a voicemail that cut straight through the fatigue. "Dad, I saw the video. Can we talk?" Marcus listened to that message 3 times, his hands on the counter, the city still moving outside the glass, and he let himself cry in quiet because some things can't be calculated. He kept working that night, finishing his shift, emptying the last bin because nothing had changed about needing to earn a living. But something had changed about what he believed he was allowed to do. Offers came, but so did questions. Owen tried an apology on LinkedIn that had the warmth of a press release. Marcus didn't respond. A regulatory inquiry opened, and summaries of Platinum Edge's true returns made headlines. A few months later, Marcus took a job that respected his mind, started teaching a free workshop once a month at a community college down the line. Financial literacy for people who get no credit. And people came. Some changed careers, others just learned to read a statement without fear. He told them to keep notes, because the world gives you credit when you show it evidence, and to never let a uniform define the reach of your mind. Here's the tricky open question. Because the story doesn't end with applause, did Marcus's single night of speaking change a system built on proximity and privilege? In some small ways, yes. A few investors moved money, a fund got fined, the billionaire's reputation got bruised. But systems are stubborn. They recalibrate. New managers learned lessons, and new ones inherited old habits. The bigger question Marcus wanted people to wrestle with is this. How many bright, trained minds are we walking past every day because they don't wear the badge we expect? How many useful truths end up pulped because someone with power likes the sound of his own laugh? So here's what I want you to do. Tell me what you think. Was Marcus right to expose what he'd found even if it meant reading things he wasn't supposed to read? Was Owen's mockery part of a culture that needs to be called out, or was it an isolated jerk move? Drop your answer in the comments. Argue, disagree. Tell us a time you underestimated someone, or when you were the one underestimated. Share this video with someone who works a job that doesn't show their mind. They might need to hear they're not invisible. If this hit a nerve, subscribe for more stories where ordinary people refuse to be small, and let's keep the conversation going about dignity, power, and who we choose to listen to.